They had everything, I had nothing. The choice that made me break the cycle of resentment and win. I never imagined that a simple Sunday lunch could so change the way I viewed my family and myself. I sat at the table, watching my brothers discuss new cars, trips, and expensive scholarships, while I counted every penny of the overdue rent and tried to plan how I would pay my college installments. My siblings, Jonas and Raquel, had generous allowances, international trips, and cars financed by my parents. My youngest, Anna, already had an exchange program secured and a room planned, while I lived in a cramped studio apartment and worked during the day to study at night. My life felt like a never-ending battle, and I carried all the burdens alone, without anyone noticing. Inside, a mixture of pride and bitterness grew with every conversation about their achievements. I wanted to celebrate with them, but the feeling of injustice consumed me. It was as if life had decided to give me only challenges while giving my brothers easy things. I swallowed the pain so as not to appear ungrateful, but the weight only grew. Every laugh, every achievement of theirs reminded me of the distance between what I had and what was denied me. The feeling of invisibility, even in my own home, was overwhelming, and it was in this scenario of silent tension that everything began to change. My name is Lucas, and this story happened almost 10 years ago when I was 23. At the time, I was a telemarketer and college student living alone in a tiny studio apartment. My daily routine was exhausting, working during the day, studying at night, and trying to stay sane in the face of debt and sleepless nights. I didn't ask for luxuries, just basic support, but I never received it. While my siblings received cars, allowances, trips, and a first-class education, I had to work twice as hard to pay for college and still face late bills. My parents always told me I was too independent and that I needed to learn to fend for myself, while praising every expense and achievement of Jonas, Raquel, and Anna. The feeling that my efforts were never recognized eroded my self-esteem, and I gradually began to wonder if I would ever be appreciated. Despite all my efforts, I felt invisible and without room for mistakes. Small victories like paying a bill or finishing a college project were my only rewards. But even so, the constant comparison with my siblings increased my frustration. What I didn't know was that Sunday lunch would be a turning point in my life, even without me being aware of it yet. The first signs that my emotional life was compromised began silently. I would wake up tired, even after sleeping, and each task of the day seemed unbearable. There were days when I found myself staring at the ceiling, wondering if it was worth continuing to struggle alone. I began to feel constant anxiety, as if I were carrying a backpack full of invisible stones. Furthermore, the weight of financial responsibility crushed me. Every bill to pay was a battle. Every late payment increased the feeling of failure. No matter how hard I tried, it seemed the world conspired to remind me that I was alone. I often cried in secret in the bathroom at work or college, without anyone noticing. Loneliness became my silent companion. Inside, I felt fragile, but on the outside, I tried to project the image of someone strong, self-sufficient, as my parents and siblings labeled me. The pressure to prove myself daily was wearing me down mentally and physically. I knew I needed a change, but I had no idea where to start. It was like walking through a storm without an umbrella, hoping someone would show up to help me. Until that lunch, the weight of years of silence and invisibility felt impossible to bear. Sunday lunch arrived, and everything exploded. Jonas complained about wanting to trade in cars, Raquel commented on designer handbags, and Anna talked about another exchange program. My parents praised every comment, every expense, every achievement. I tried to remain calm, chewing slowly, but the lump in my throat grew with every word. It was like swallowing years of injustice and invisibility. I couldn't contain myself any longer. I raised my voice and began to vent, talking about the debts, the pressure of working and studying at the same time, and the feeling of always being the invisible middle child. I spoke of the pain of watching my brothers receive financial aid, while I struggled alone. The words came out with such intensity that silence fell over the table. Everyone was shocked. I trembled, my heart racing, and yet I didn't regret it. It was the first time I had let out all the anger, frustration, and sadness I'd built up over the years. I needed them to see me, not as the self-sufficient son, but as someone who also suffered. The tension was almost palpable, and I knew that moment would change everything. The family's reaction was mixed. My mother tried to downplay it, saying I was exaggerating and that they'd always loved me the same. My father simply lowered his head, while my brothers remained silent, perhaps realizing their privilege for the first time. I left the table before they could respond again, shaking, sweating, but with an unexpected sense of relief. For the first time, I felt my voice had been heard, even if there were still no immediate answers or changes. I left that lunch with a mixture of fear and hope. Fear of judgment, hope that finally something might change. It was the first step toward overcoming, even if I still didn't know exactly what that path would be. After that lunch, my relationship with my family became even more complicated. For weeks, no one reached out to me, and I didn't try to contact them either. The silence that had once felt like relief began to weigh heavily, making the loneliness almost unbearable. I would come home, exhausted from work and college, lie on the tiny bed in my studio apartment and stare at the ceiling, wondering if I would ever be recognized. The debts remained, and the feeling of helplessness was constant. There were nights when negative thoughts surrounded me, and I wondered if it would all ever make sense. Still, a spark inside me told me that giving up was not an option. Anger and frustration mixed with the need to move on. I began to realize that I couldn't expect my family to change or value me. The only person capable of doing that for me was myself. This realization, though painful, became the first real step toward overcoming it. I realized I needed professional help. I had never been to therapy, but something inside me told me I couldn't do it alone. I looked for a teaching clinic at the university that offered free counseling. I hesitated before scheduling the first session, but emotional exhaustion overcame my resistance. I remember the first session. I sat down, started talking, and realized I had years of repressed feelings. Inside me, the psychologist listened to every word without interrupting, without judging, simply validating my pain. For the first time, I felt someone truly understood my experience. The following sessions were challenging. I had to confront feelings of inadequacy, resentment, and the constant anxiety that accompanied me. I learned to identify toxic thought patterns and build tools to cope with pressure. I discovered that my self-esteem could not depend on the approval of others, even if they were my family. This process brought me clarity and strength to face my own challenges. Alongside therapy, I began looking for ways to improve my financial situation. I continued working as a telemarketer, but used every free hour to study and pursue freelance opportunities. I discovered free courses in digital marketing, design, and writing, and each small, completed project gave me a previously unknown sense of accomplishment. My first payment from a freelance job was symbolic but significant. It was the fruit of my own direct effort, and it gave me genuine pride. With each task, with each client I served, I felt I was taking control of my life. The struggle with debt continued, but now I saw a direction. Each step, however small, brought me closer to a more stable and independent life. For the first time in years, I realized I could build my own future without relying on help or recognition from my family. Despite the progress, not everything was easy. There were times when I considered giving up, weeks without getting freelance work, anxiety attacks at work, and sleepless nights. The weight of family pressures seemed to follow me, and the constant comparison with my siblings still gnawed at me. But with each hardship, I learned something new about my resilience. Therapy helped me channel frustration into productive energy and constant effort. Even on bad days, reminded me of the value of hard work. I learned that feeling pain doesn't mean failure. It means we're living and trying to grow. The challenges, though exhausting, began to become learning opportunities, and the feeling of helplessness gave way to a growing sense of control over my own life. The big turning point began when my father lost his job. Suddenly, the source of income that had supported my siblings' luxuries dried up. Jonas had his car repossessed. Raquel had to postpone her exchange program. Anna had to cancel trips and adjust her expenses. And me, I was more prepared than ever. That middle child, who had always been told to get by, had learned to truly get by. For the first time, I realized that my solitary struggle had given me skills and strength that my siblings would never have needed to develop. Cruel irony, I thought, but at the same time liberating. I could help them if I wanted, but not out of obligation, but by choice. And it was from this perspective that I realized that overcoming adversity isn't just about overcoming it alone, but also about deciding how to act in the face of those who previously underestimated us. When my father called me asking for help, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Part of me wanted to say, "It's up to you now." But another, more mature part understood that holding a grudge would only hurt me. He was fragile, dejected, something I'd never seen before. The bills were piling up. His eyes were tired, lacking the pride that had always characterized him. I took a deep breath and said I'd help as much as I could. It wasn't much, but it was enough to ease the immediate pain. In that moment, I understood that my overcoming wasn't about revenge or retribution, but about balance. I could be supportive without losing myself in the process. For the first time, I felt a kind of emotional freedom, a space to act consciously without the weight of invisibility I'd carried for years. That moment showed me that life isn't about expecting recognition, but about choosing to act with integrity, even in the face of those who underestimated us. Helping my family also meant setting boundaries and teaching responsibility. Jonas, Raquel, and Anna needed to understand that the world doesn't operate on automatic privileges. It was difficult. There was resistance, tears, and even arguments. But little by little, they realized the difference between dependence and autonomy. My support wasn't permission to remain irresponsible. It was an opportunity to start over, learn, and value effort. Every conversation about finances, every piece of advice on planning made me feel like I finally had a voice. For the first time, respect didn't come from titles or money, but from the recognition of the experience and maturity I'd built through struggle. This attitude changed my relationships with my siblings. They weren't perfect, but they became more honest and human. I no longer needed to compete for their affection or approval. My focus was on acting consciously, respecting my limits. I share this story because I know many feel the same way I did, invisible at home, overwhelmed and alone, watching others receive privileges and attention. The feeling of being less than is devastating, but overcoming it is possible. It requires courage to face one's own pain, determination to build alternatives, and patience to wait for the results of constant effort. I learned that transformation doesn't happen overnight, but gradually, through small achievements, conscious decisions, and self-worth. My growth process taught me that no one can give us dignity. It must be earned internally. It took years of effort, sleepless nights, grueling work, and academic challenges, but every step was worth it. Today, I look back and see how the journey shaped me, making me resilient and more self-aware. I learned to deal with difficult emotions, manage resources, and establish priorities. Change didn't come about by miracles, but through continuous effort, discipline, and the decision not to let the past determine my future. Life, which once seemed like an endless battle, became an opportunity to demonstrate strength and learn valuable lessons. The greatest transformation, however, was internal. I learned that my worth didn't depend on family approval or the privilege of others. For years, I sought recognition, and when I didn't find it, I felt pain and frustration. Today, I realize that my true victory was recognizing my strength and ability to overcome obstacles alone. This understanding freed me from unnecessary resentment and allowed me to act with empathy, awareness, and balance. I finally saw that overcoming suffering doesn't mean erasing suffering, but rather learning from it, transforming pain into learning and growth. My professional life began to transform in a tangible way. With the experience gained from freelance work and extra hours of study, I was able to open my own small communications agency. The beginning was difficult: small clients, little income, and endless workdays. But each challenge was accompanied by a growing sense of autonomy and fulfillment. For the first time, I realized that my achievements depended solely on my effort and dedication. It wasn't easy. Mistakes happened, financial crises arose, but the feeling of building something with my own hands was indescribable. Financial independence, which had previously seemed a distant goal, became a tangible reality. My confidence in my abilities grew with each project delivered and each satisfied client. I discovered that, despite the difficulties, I was able to create opportunities where before I only saw obstacles. I also learned about boundaries. Before, I accepted any situation that seemed necessary to maintain family or social ties, even if it harmed me. Today, I can say no when I need to preserve my emotional and financial balance. Setting boundaries was one of the most important changes I've implemented in my life. They allowed me to help my family while also protecting my own stability. The feeling of freedom that comes with clearly defining boundaries is liberating. I no longer depend on anyone's approval to feel like I'm doing the right thing. My priority has become my emotional health and my own journey, without neglecting empathy and caring for others. Resilience has become a core value in my life. I've learned that being resilient doesn't mean enduring everything in silence or sacrificing without recognition. Resilience means feeling the pain, facing it head-on, and moving forward. It means seeking support when needed, learning from mistakes, and transforming challenges into opportunities for growth. Every difficulty I've faced, every debt I've paid, every rejection I've suffered has made me stronger. Today, I can handle complex situations with greater balance and clarity. The learning process was painful, but transformative, and the feeling of victory comes from within, not from external applause. I don't want to romanticize pain. Suffering isn't pretty, and it's not always inspiring when we're in the midst of chaos, but what I want to show is that pain can be transformed into learning and strength, not magically, but through effort, persistence, and self-knowledge. Today, I can look back on my past difficulties with gratitude, recognizing that they shaped me and prepared me to make more informed decisions. The lessons I learned about responsibility, resilience, and self-worth are now the foundation of everything I've achieved. Sharing this story is my way of conveying hope. I want my experience to show that even when all seems lost, there is a path to rebuilding. It requires courage, effort, and patience, but it exists. My life changed not because I received privileges, but because I decided to face my challenges, learn from them, and take control of my destiny. Today, I can look back and recognize that overcoming adversity is a continuous journey, made up of small daily victories, conscious decisions, and personal growth. If you've ever felt invisible, overwhelmed, or underappreciated, I want you to know that your pain is valid. I experienced this for years, always feeling like the middle child who had to fend for myself, while others received everything effortlessly. The feeling of being left out hurts, erodes self-esteem, and makes us question our worth. But I can assure you, There is a path to rebuilding yourself and seeing yourself as someone worthy, capable, and deserving of respect. Overcoming obstacles begins when we stop waiting for others to recognize us and start recognizing ourselves. The emotional and financial autonomy I achieved didn't erase my pain, but it gave me the strength to move forward. Today, I understand that my worth doesn't depend on what I receive from others, but on what I build with my own hands, on the courage I've developed, and the resilience I've learned to cultivate. That Sunday lunch was, paradoxically, the turning point. Exploding with frustration and exposing my emotions wasn't pretty or elegant, but it was necessary. For years, I'd bottled up my pain, swallowed resentment, and tried to survive silently. When I finally spoke up, I realized that honesty about my feelings opened the door for real change. It was the beginning of a journey that made me realize we can't expect recognition from those who aren't willing to value us. We need to act on our own. This awareness freed me from toxic family patterns and allowed me to build a life based on effort, learning, and self-worth. My life isn't perfect yet, and there are days when anxiety or memories of the past try to overwhelm me. But today, I wake up with hope and motivation. I know I can continue building something meaningful, even in the face of challenges. Small victories, conscious choices, and daily self-awareness remind me that I can overcome. Every obstacle I faced was transformed into a learning experience, and each achievement became a milestone in my resilience. The feeling of being in control of my life is powerful and allows me to deal with uncertainty without losing my emotional balance. If you feel underestimated or belittled, remember that your worth lies within you. No one can erase your strength or capabilities. The difficulties we face shape us and teach us valuable lessons. It's important to understand that overcoming pain doesn't mean the absence of pain, but rather the ability to learn from it and transform it into personal growth. Every step taken, every obstacle overcome, every conscious decision strengthens the trajectory. My journey shows that even without privileges, without external recognition, it's possible to build a solid and dignified life. In closing, I want to make it clear that overcoming is possible. It's not quick, it's not easy, but it is concrete. I, Lucas, the son who always felt invisible, learned to see myself, to value my efforts, and to act consciously. Today, I have autonomy, self-esteem, and resilience. My story is not about perfection, but about growth, courage, and real transformation. If you're in the darkness, keep going. The light exists, and it's within reach of those who dedicate themselves to rebuilding themselves, step by step, even in the face of pain.